Anna, welcome to Becoming Okay.
Megan, thank you for having
It
me.
feels so weird. Like, hi, I'm using your name. Usually you're like, babe, lovely girl.
Yeah, it's more formal, isn't it, with the name? Sometimes people sort
I
of think,
know.
oh, the name, like, yes.
Literally, you're going to be my therapist today, honey. I've been so excited for this episode because you are, yeah, we've had lots of ideas. We've had lots of ideas around where we want to take you and I working together, starting with this podcast and really just talking about you and your story and the work you do. Um, but I'm really intrigued by taking people behind the scenes of therapy and how that looks today. So let's start there, actually. Let's start
Mm,
there. Tell me
it's an
about what you're
interest.
doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
go
therapy's got
on.
such a stigma around it these days, I
It
think.
does. It does. I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think, you never really get to see what goes on in the therapy room unless BBC One, couples therapy, BBC
Hmm.
iPlayer even, sorry, showing
I
my age,
love
BBC
that.
iPlayer. That's a good glimpse, isn't it, into what goes on. But yeah, um, therapy, I think there's a lot less stigma, I would say, than there has been about it. I would say the UK is still behind the US in terms of it's still not as talked about. It almost feels like everyone over there has got like a therapist or at least a coach as a bare minimum. Like
They
coach.
love it, don't they? I spoke to a
Yeah.
lady that just totally reminded me that said that she'd went to one of those like summit, like corporate conference or something like that, like a big one over in the States, and it was for like tech and science, I believe. And one of the ladies that won an award, she got up on stage and she did her like thank you speech. And in her thank you speech, she was like, first and foremost, I want to thank my therapist. And I was like, I love that. Like, you wouldn't do that here, would you? You wouldn't stand on stage and go, I'm going to thank my
No. And
therapist because
now,
now everyone knows
well,
I'm going through trauma. It's like, that's how it's
yeah.
perceived.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think therapy is used by so many different people in different ways as well. Like some people, they do go to talk about trauma, they do go to talk through things. And some people just want a safe space where they can be completely and openly honest and themselves and have a sounding board. Like some people
Mm,
really do want methods and techniques and things like that to work through situations that keep appearing in their life, or maybe to talk about past stuff. But, and some people are, they're all right and they just want a bit of maintenance and they just want to check in with someone and keep themselves accountable for things. So it really is what works for you. And there's different therapists who are better at the former or the latter as well. So
yeah.
it's really what it means for you. And I think that's the beauty of something that's so personal like therapy and something that is so one to one and so kind of specific to that person as well.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm totally biased, but I'm a fan.
I like this maintenance piece because I shared online a while ago now, and it really resonated with a lot of people about how my partner Damien told me if we were to go to couples therapy, like, why wouldn't we go now? And my response was, well, we're not broken. And then he turned around and said, well, actually, isn't that the problem? We all go and seek help once we're broken, and by that point, is it too late? And I think that was a really like enlightening moment for myself. And so when you talk about using therapy for maintenance, like, can I come to you if I feel pretty good? Like I'm a
Yeah,
7 or an 8 out of 10. Are you still going to see me?
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And I do love those sessions as well because I think it's a good sort of check in and a good reminder that things are going well and things can be really good. And it's, you know, emotion is fluid, isn't it? So one minute you're feeling really good and that's great. And then it can change. So it's like, how did we kind of maintain that state of being content? Now, that's not realistic to have that 100% of the time because it's just not. But how can that kind of be your baseline? How can you come back to that when something untoward does happen, whether it's with work, family, whatever it is? Like, how can you come back to that state of being? And I think, like anything, like maintaining your physical health, it's the same. It's just keeping that going. Like anything that you have in your life that's important, you need to maintain, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's work, whether it's a side hustle, like it all needs maintenance. And that maintenance doesn't have to be difficult or hard. It's just, it needs some focus and it needs you to put some energy towards it. And once you do that, it maintains and you reap reap the rewards of it. So yeah, I love that your partner said, why don't we do couples therapy now? Now we're at like, say like a 9 out of 10. Why don't we go now? And I think that it can just be really good as well sometimes to just have someone who isn't involved to just kind of be there to kind of talk about how you guys are doing and to just see, I guess, if there could be any areas where things could be that bit better as well. Because I think everything can be a little bit better. And why not? We have one life. Why not have it as good as it can be?
I did listen to the divorce lawyer. I forget his name. He was on Diary of a CEO. A friend shared it with me and was like, you've got to check out this episode. And so I was listening to it this morning, actually. And one of the things he said on that, which I think is probably a good place to start before we start investing in therapy, but just to have like check-ins, just check-ins with you, like your partner, because we're very big on like complimenting each other, saying how much we love each other. We'll send random messages throughout the day. Like things are good. Like I don't think we need a check-in, but again, it's that maintenance. Like what's the harm in sitting down and having an hourly check-in once a week? Like what harm is it doing? If anything, it's doing things that are going to propel our relationship and make it stronger and better, because I can't read your mind, nor can you read mine, and life's busy. And it's very easy to put that on the back burner. But my relationship is one of the most important things in my life. So instead of just becoming passing ships and sharing dinner and having odd conversations, why aren't we making those conversations seriously meaningful towards him and I and what we need?
Yeah. And I think even just having like you said, 1 hour once a week where you sit down or you go out for a walk, because sometimes it can be less confrontational when you're sort of walking side by side as well. It's whatever works for the couple. And you don't have your phone, because that is such a huge blocker of energy and blocker of connection when you're sat on the sofa with your partner with your phone. Like you're essentially saying my phone is more important than you, even if you don't feel that's what you're communicating across. So having that hour where you kind of look at, okay, do you know what? I really loved it when you did that this week. I really loved it when you reached out to me and asked me if you could help because you knew I was going through something difficult on Tuesday or whatever it is. And I also think when I do couples therapy as well, I think coming at it from the point of view of what can I give more to this relationship, and asking your partner that, and then they ask you that in return, rather than saying, you should do more of this, or I wish that you would do like this rather than what you're currently doing. It's much more about like service, and then you get the same back as well. And I think looking at it like the health of the relationship. So the relationship is like a unit itself. And it's like, how healthy is our relationship? How good is our relationship? Of course, it's not going to be good 24/7, but it's like, how can we repair things when it does go wrong? How can we navigate through those challenges? It's not arguments that make people break up. It's not being able to repair conflict. It's not being able to compromise or come to an agreement. That's what damages people, not actually having arguments. Because arguments, you're two separate people, and that's normal to disagree on things. You're probably coming from two different walks of life. Some of the best, healthiest couples I've seen think about things completely differently, but they have that acknowledgement that they do think about things completely differently. And they know that if they're thinking one way, the likelihood is their partner's thinking something completely different. And that's okay, because they acknowledge it and they can work through it. It's, they have the knowledge, and that's data. So yeah, absolutely love the idea of 1 hour a week check-in. Like you're saying, it's maintenance, and it's a small amount of time to save a big amount of time further down the line. And like you say, your partner is the most important thing in your life, or and that should be the way. Otherwise, yeah, there's no point, or at least the most important relationship.
That's the hardest self-reflection question, isn't it, in a relationship? And I wonder how you've helped people through this, because what if we are getting to a point in our relationships where we're not happy, we're not content, this person isn't my number one, and I don't know if I ever want that to change. But on the other side of that coin is, I'm going to be super lonely without this person, and I don't know how to build my own.
Oh, that's the worst reason to stay with someone, because you feel lonely. Yeah, that's the worst. I have to say, from personal experience, like the loneliest I've ever felt hasn't been when I've been single. The loneliest I've ever felt is when I've been in a relationship that I knew was wrong for me.
Oh,
not because of anything bad on the other side, just because I knew it was wrong for me. And that's the loneliest that I've ever felt. And I think the number one way to prolong that loneliness is to stay in that relationship.
Mm.
Um, and, there is that quote that you've probably heard, which is usually the hardest decision is the right one. And that's not 100% of the time correct, but I actually do think for the majority of the time that is correct. That the hardest decision is usually the right one, which is probably to leave. And you probably know it deep down. And I think when we are living inauthentically as well, our soul is like saying one thing and our actions are saying another thing. That that just causes an underlying level of stress that you can't shift until you leave that situation.
Yeah, I was starting to think, because we've started to dive down this rabbit hole of relationships. I wonder about non-romantic relationships as well, friendships, family members, etc. Because there's talking about quotes, there's one of those famous quotes that you're a reflection of the 5 people you're closest to in your life. So you mirror the people you spend most of your time with. And I wonder how many people come to you and you start to unravel that a lot of the problems are to do with friends and family, and they're really hard relationships to break off from as well. Like you hear that blood's thicker than water, etc., and how important your family should be to you, especially when you don't know how much time you have left. But what about if that family member or that friendship is toxic and it's making you unwell? How have you helped
Mm,
people with that?
mm. No, definitely. And I think that, yeah, ultimately we are who we surround ourselves with, because we actually can't help but to become like the people that we are with.
Mm.
So it's like those mirror neurons, within us. We just mirror other people. We can't help it. We gravitate towards what's familiar. If we keep seeing a certain thing, we're going to gravitate towards that. So, and it comes back to this thing as well, where a lot of people meet people and they are right for them at a specific time in their life. So they become friends, and then they that person changes and they maybe outgrow those friendships, or they change, and then they kind of are looking at those friendships and they're like, it's not quite right, but I feel guilt to let them go completely, and I feel we've had so many good memories together. So I think it's kind of about honoring the time that you spent with that person, but maybe not having them in your inner circle anymore, and maybe just distancing yourself a little bit from them. Doesn't have to be completely cutting them off, but it might be, instead of seeing them every week, you see them every couple of months. And then you have kind of other people that naturally move more into your inner circle. And I think a lot of people like hold on to these friendships that no longer serve them, because they're kind of confused with why they were once their best friends and now they no longer are. But change is a natural part of life, and it can be a really, really good thing. So I would start to kind of distance myself from those people. There isn't really any other way around it. I mean, they're very toxic and they're, for example, causing, lots of drama, and they've got a lot of chaos in their life. You need to cut them off completely. Otherwise, you are going to become that chaos. You are going to get dragged into that. And at the bare minimum, it's an energy burn from you for you to listen to it all the time. Because while you're doing that, you're not doing other things. I think it becomes difficult when it's to do with family, but I would say the same thing applies. I would say keeping them at arm's length if they are toxic, if they are chaotic. And I know that word toxic is so horrible, isn't it? 'Cause it's like, oh God,
Mm.
you're a toxic person.
Yeah.
They're probably not. They might just have toxic traits, or some traits that are just, you're not, you don't agree with them. Or at one point you found them exciting and now you just find it chaotic. And I'm sure they have wonderful traits too. But if those other traits are kind of overriding the good stuff, then you need to move away from that, because it will pull you into it. And you don't then have space for new people who probably are more in line with the type of person that you want to be, and where you're heading. Um, I think, yeah, and particularly if you're doing things like growing your business or creating something, you need to be around people who are doing the same thing. You need to be around people who are going to energize you and are going to lift you up, not people who are drowning in like self-pity or negativity. Or, everyone goes through bad things in their life. That's normal, and you want to be there to support them. But where it's constant, it's not about the situation they're in, it's about their pattern. And unfortunately, they're attracting this drama, they're attracting this negativity if it keeps continually happening. So yeah.
That's surrounding
Go on.
yourself by, sorry, that's surrounding yourself by people that almost like motivate you then if you're going through that period of life where you're going through positive change and you're working towards certain goals or missions in your life? Is that where comparison can actually be a good thing? Like, I'm learning a lot about
Mm-hmm.
how language changes in the situation, how it's perceived. Like, we always say that comparison is the thief of joy, but I actually love comparing myself and using someone who inspires or motivates me, that's doing what I wish I could have in perhaps 2, 3, 5 years time, as someone to look up to and be like, right, like, do I wish I was there? Am I slightly jealous? Of course I am. Everyone is to an extent. But how can I healthily compare myself to this person and surround myself by the things they do and the goals they set? Because that will only push me and enhance my own efforts. Well, that's
I
how I
think
see it.
no, I think you touched on it there. I think it's like healthy envy. I think
Mm,
jealousy is unhealthy, but I think healthy envy and having someone that, has trodden the path that you're on, that you're currently walking. I think it's a great role model and someone that, you want to aspire to be similar to. We're all different. So I don't necessarily think we should be like, I want to be this person. But I think that there's traits of people that we can really admire, the way in which they succeeded at something or the way in which they were, or are. I think, yeah, I think that part of comparison is helpful, is useful. I think the Instagram effect is not useful. And I'm using that term in the sense that, like, we log onto Instagram and we see people having these beautifully curated lives and, TikTok and everything else. And I think that well, it's not realistic, but unfortunately, what the eye sees, the brain automatically believes. And it takes a while for you to kind of intercept that and go, hang on, no, that's not actually the case, because the brain instantly believes whatever it sees. It's just how it functions. I think that's unhealthy. But I think having someone who you realistically know and you've seen how they navigate struggles, they don't just suddenly have this amazing life. Like, you've seen the effort they put in, you've seen how they navigate things, you've seen their outlook. Yeah, I think that's healthy for sure. That's a healthy version of comparison.
what about people that come to you and they are grieving for someone that hasn't passed, but almost the life they imagine they have, or the relationship they envisioned in their future, and those relationships are now broken down and they're grieving that in real time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think whenever you try to suppress feelings, it never works. So it's almost like having a beach ball, like an inflatable ball, and trying to hold it under the water. That's what you're trying
Hmm.
to do with your emotions. Ultimately, it just wants to spring back up. And ultimately, at some point, your hands will get tired, you'll let go, and the emotion will come back up. So I think it's being able to hold that grief and that emotion and allow it to be there. It's horrible, it's painful, but it's ultimately the price that, or at least the risk that you pay for being in a romantic relationship. And we all know the risk, even if we don't think it through at the time. We all know the risk, but still the majority of us choose to do it.
Mm.
So unfortunately, it's the price that you pay for being in love, let's say, and then having that break down. And of course, it doesn't always break down, but most of us at some point have been through heartbreak, and we're still here.
Yeah.
Um, we're still here, and you carry on. You just carry on, and those same people do it again. And this is the majority of people in the world. So yeah, it's horrible, but it won't kill you. Um,
Mm.
and ultimately, like, a relationship is not fully in your control because it's another person, and you don't know what you know that other person, of course, but you don't know them the way you know yourself, and you don't know really what they're going through. You won't always know their full reasons why. So you just have to respect that that's their decision and get through it the best you can. Have support. This is why having a good circle around you is very important. This is why having healthy habits are really important. This is why having space for your brain to function is really important, and not being like overwhelmed with things. So
Mm.
yeah, a difficult one.
Yeah, this divorce lawyer on this podcast earlier was saying how, I don't quote me, but I think it was something like 56% of people will go through a divorce. So it's more than
Mm-hmm.
half the population out there will get married, will have a divorce. And then of those 56 people that go through the divorce and the heartbreak, will actually, like, 86 or 87% of them will remarry, and they'll do it all over again. And you
Yeah,
think, gosh,
exactly.
that's nuts. But we are the love outweighs the loss, doesn't it? If you knew walking into that relationship with someone you love so much that there was going to be an end date on it, as there is with everyone we love, we're setting ourselves up for, I suppose not failure, but we all know it's going to hurt at some point because no one's here forever. But if
No,
we went
exactly.
through life not enjoying the love that we got and we're just scared of the loss, we'd lose so much of that in the process. There's something there like at Christmas time, obviously. I say recently been and gone. It's been a while ago now, but I spoke a lot about my granddad during that time because everyone was asking what were you doing for Christmas, what was the plans of holiday, and I was like, we don't really celebrate Christmas as much. It's really quiet in our household, and we celebrate Boxing Day, and that's because my gramps lost his wife, my gran, 26 years ago now, but he has not celebrated a Christmas Day since without her, and he lets himself go on Boxing Day. He's like, Christmas Day was for me and her, and because she's not here anymore, that's it. I'm not celebrating it, but I will celebrate on Boxing Day, and that's just been a big thing for everyone. And I've thought about it. I thought about it a lot the more and more I spoke about it out loud, and I'm thinking like, should that grieving process stop? Though, like, are we doing ourselves more of a disservice by holding on to that? Because in some ways it's super romantic, and in some ways it's sad.
Yeah, I think it's really individual. I think it's really what works for one person, and I think that's the right thing to do. I think that grief as well, it's not so scriptive. Like sometimes you'll be absolutely fine, and other times you might cry for a week when someone
Mm.
passes, and that could be years on. You don't really know when that grief is going to hit. So I think, yeah, 26 years, of course, is a long time. And like you say, it does happen to all of us. None of us are here forever. We all have an expiry date, unfortunately. So it sounds to me like it's more of a celebration. And I think that's lovely. And I think honoring who she was and you know, how she was when she was alive is really beautiful. And I think
Mm.
that's wonderful. But I don't think there's necessarily like, okay, well, you've grieved for 10 years, that's enough now, move on. I think people have to do it in their own time. And a
Mm.
lot of people, of course, it's really common to like on the anniversary of someone's death to go to their grave or to, light a candle for them. And I think that's a beautiful way of just honoring someone that was here and who meant so much to you. And I do think death is the ultimate reminder of time is finite. And I think people that you love, you should make sure that you spend time with and are important to you. And when you are spending time with them, you're present. You're not sat on your phone. Like you do have quality time with them and you are engaged and you're interested in them. Because I think that's so important because they won't be here forever and we won't be here forever. So I think death is the ultimate reminder of that. It's kind of the ultimate reminder to live.
What about regret then? What about, because I remember listening to Sahil Bloom talk about being on your deathbed and the worst thing that, what would be the worst thing that would ever happen to you in that moment? What would be the worst feeling for you? And, I thought about it a lot, and I think it would be living with regrets. And I, go back to the conversation 5-10 minutes ago about people breaking down relationships and becoming distant from family and friends. I think that's fairly commonish. Like you say, we go through different seasons of our lives. Something that was once exciting now becomes chaos, and
Mhm.
so we change. We're supposed to change. But what about when you go through grief and someone sat there and they're like, I wish I had more time, or I wish I'd done something different, or I regret that. How does anyone recover from that?
Yeah, it's such a difficult one. I think regret is such a difficult emotion, guilt, regret, shame, because you can't go back in time.
Mm.
And the brain often fixates on things and it ruminates on things because on some level it thinks, well, if I'm responsible, I can change it. And all you can do is change things going forward. You can't, of course, change the past, but you can learn from the past. But we're all here to have a human experience, and making mistakes is part of that human experience. Like whether it's mistakes in love, whether it's mistakes in business, whether it's mistakes in life, like we're all here to make those mistakes. We weren't meant to be born perfect. So I think a lot of self-forgiveness is really important. Um, I do think there's lots of studies done on what people say when they're on their deathbed in terms of in terms of regrets. And one thing that kind of pops to my mind that's often talked about is living a life for other people, and like living a life that you think other people want you to live, whether it's your mum, whether it's your dad, whether it's whoever, your partner, and not truly living a life that you want to live. And that often comes up as one of the number one regrets that people have. Now, unfortunately, if you're lying on your deathbed, you can't change that. All you can do is pass on your wisdom. We're not lying on our deathbed, so we can look at our life and kind of think, am I living for me? Like, am I doing stuff that I want to do? Or am I doing something because I feel like this is what my parents want? Like, am I with my partner because it's what I want? Sounds like you are, which is wonderful. But that's quite a common one. And lots of variations of that as well. And I think as difficult as it is, like, be strong and carve out your own path, because you only get really one chance.
Mm,
There is really only one chance. We get one life.
mm.
Um, so yeah, and I think when people regret things in general, I just think it comes down to self-forgiveness and self-love, and use that as motivation or as lessons or as learnings not to make the same mistake again. Don't let that go wasted. Like, if you have made a mistake, use it as a lesson. Don't let that mistake just go. Because then it becomes important, and then it becomes something you can learn from, and then it's a forward moving energy.
We have a sponsor for today's episode, and you've probably heard so much about them already, but it is the Mind Mental Health Charity. And I have recently become an ambassador for Cornwall Mind, which, if you don't know, is my hometown. The things they are doing out there for mental health is so impactful, and the fact that you will all have a local mind near you, a local community that's sharing events and fundraising, but also has the right point of call to help direct you into where you need to go to support your mental health. I know the NHS waiting list it's huge and it's frightening. And if it wasn't for charities like Mind and the people that support those charities, so many people out there wouldn't be able to get the help that they get. So thank you to Cornwall Mind and everyone involved for always, always, always being there. And back to the episode. What's your life story, lovely? Like, what's happened in order for you to say, or to wake up one day and say, I want to be a therapist? That's important to you.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So I I didn't start in therapy. When I was 18, I studied fashion buying and merchandising, which is completely different. And
Yeah.
then I went into sales in the city for a while, and then I had a recruitment company as well. And then at maybe like 27, 28, I'm 36, so maybe at 27, 28, 27, I kind of was like, this isn't really what I want to do forever. So rewind back to when I was a child, I always had OCD, which is really spoken about now. Lots of people know about it. Lots of people, unfortunately, have it. Um, but at 5 years old, I didn't know what it was. I just knew I had compulsions.
5. That's young.
Yeah, I know, literally
Mm,
5 years old. Um, I knew I had to like check things, double check things, etc., etc. Maybe it sounds like it wasn't very serious, but this would take up hours of my life. I
mm.
couldn't walk on pavement cracks. I had to check the door was locked, God knows however many times. And this, as OCD does, continued into being an adult. Then I got help for it with therapy. Went on medication as well for a while because OCD is very much linked with anxiety. Um, Managed that to a really good point. And then I was like, I'm going to study psychology. So that was my path. And then, yeah, fast forward several years after that, here we are today. So yeah, that's pretty much my story. But um, love all things psychology, super interesting, super fascinating. Every case is different. Every case I'm learning something. What's really interesting as well is there's so many different mental health disorders coming out. There's something called the DSM-5, which is the mental health book of all the disorders that gets updated every year. They're constantly updating things, changing things, coming up with new solutions, new way of dealing with things. Again, it's very personal. So different modalities, different types of therapies work for different people. So it's really nice to just see people on their journey. And what's really nice for me is I've had clients that I've had for years, And it's lovely to see them. It's a weird one because it's lovely to see them come back, but you're also kind of not wanting them to come back because you're kind of wanting them to just, fly and
Mm.
be good. But life happens, they come back, and it's lovely to see them having, even though they're back in therapy, having progressed up until this point and continuing to progress. And a lot of people just come back for a reminder or to check in or to talk about something in particular. So you build these really strong relationships with people. And it's a very human thing. Like it's a very human career, I guess. And that really works for me. I really like it.
Do you see, like, obviously you've got own lived experiences with mental health, you see people every single day struggling. Do you see mental health as a symptom? Did you see it for yourself? Was it like getting a headache and saying there's an underlying issue here perhaps that I need to address? Or because I think a lot of the language around it now is very much like you're broken, you need fixing, you have a mental health disorder, you're ill, you can't function like the average. I think we're leaning further and further away from the stigma around that, but I do think mental health still comes with a slight stigma. And when I read a book, A Mind of Your Own by Kelly Brogan, she spoke so much about how mental health is actually inflammation in the body. So it's a trigger, it's a symptom saying that something's wrong, and why sometimes medications is just putting a band-aid on the problem. And to get to the underlying root cause, we need to do things like changing our lifestyle, our
Hmm.
habits, our exercise, our talking therapies, meditation, things like that, practicing those coping mechanisms every single day to build up the muscle memory. So like you said before, when something happens tragically, like a loss or heartbreak, we have the muscle memory in order to help us get through that a bit better than perhaps we would if we didn't have those things. And I just think it's not really spoken about a lot. I think we stick that label on it and say you're an anxious person or you're depressed, and here's a traditional path, and we'll check in, and it's just kind of that. But I'm like, I spent 13 years like that, and I don't actually know if I was addressing the problem or just masking it.
We all have mental health, like we all
Mm.
have physical health. And say we live for 100 years, let's just say, at some point in that 100 years, we're going to have problems with our physical health. I don't see there's any difference with us having problems with our mental health. Like, no one would expect you to live for 100 years and not have any physical problems. Cough, cold, flu, a lot of people, sadly, cancer, things like this. So, why would someone expect you to have perfect mental health for that same length of time? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, particularly when you aren't doing the maintenance or someone isn't doing the maintenance. Of course, at some point, things are going to get too much. We're going to feel anxious, which is over a normal amount, let's say. We're going to feel depressed. So it's normal to feel these negative emotions, things like sadness, things like anxiety. I think what makes it into a mental health disorder is when that anxiety doesn't shift. So when you have it for, say, 3 weeks or more, and it's at a certain intensity that it's really taking up a lot of your headspace. You're thinking about it all the time. You're in it. And the same with depression. When you're in that for a long period of time, it becomes a disorder. And I hate that word disorder because it's like, yeah, it almost feels like it's kind of final, and it's not. And there's so many things that we can do to work our way around it and to manage it. And once you've done it once, like anything, it becomes easier. Once you've worked on your OCD once and you think it's pretty much gone, say it's a 1 out of 10 rather than a 10 out of 10, well, if it comes back and it starts to get to a 4 or 5, you can manage it and it becomes easier, and it can go back down to a 2 or a 1. Mental health is just a part of our life. And I think the more we normalize it, like what you were saying with the States when the lady was thanking her therapist, the more
Mm.
we normalize it, like the more everyone else can feel a bit more confident with it and not feel like they're going to get stigmatized for having it, because you wouldn't think that if you had a cough or a cold. And it is becoming so much more normal, but I still think that there's more work that we can do around it. And we're lucky as well. I think in the UK, there's a lot of support that people can access. Of course, there's the NHS, there's a lot of private centres that do low cost work as well. There's the Awareness Centre. I was going to say, it's just left my brain what it was, but the Awareness Centre do low cost therapy. They have lots of trainee therapists there as well, which is really good. So you can access low cost therapy. you just kind of need to dig a little beneath the surface and you'll find something for you. You know, a lot of people like hypnotherapy, a lot of people like theta healing, more of the spiritual approaches, things like the somatic practices, like you were talking about, combining the body, of course. So doing exercise and doing, you know, cold plunge and sauna and all of these things can just put you into a different state. And when you're in a different physical state, your thoughts change. Your body has a direct influence on your brain and the other way around. So, in your mind. So these things can really help tap into a calm, relaxed, sympathetic state, or parasympathetic state, sorry, rather than a sympathetic nervous system state.
Mm.
So yeah, combined holistic approach. There's lots out there.
What's the most like common concerns you're seeing at the moment then? Like we speak so much about anxiety and depression. Is that ultimately what walks through your door most days, or are you seeing other things that are starting to
Yeah,
unravel?
I think anxiety and depression will probably always be there. I think the triggers become different as we move through life. You know, it's 2026. A lot of people are suffering from like dopamine burnout, so spending too much time on their phone, too much time scrolling. Um, it probably be no surprise to you, but there's that loneliness pandemic as well, where a lot of people's interactions are digital, so they're not getting that proper one-to-one with someone. They're not getting that the energy of being with humans, of being with people. You know, we were built to be social animals. Does that mean we want to be with people 24/7? No, but it's important for our nervous system to be with people, not just on a screen or, you know, texting someone. And I think in relationships as well, circling back to what we were talking about before, time away from the phone, time with your partner, because you're putting that as a barrier in the relationship. It depletes a lot of your energy. When you're staring at a screen, a lot of your energy is going into that screen, and it also shuts off things like your creative capabilities. So I think it's very difficult, because even with myself, I'm like, oh, I'll put my phone away for a while. Then I'm like, oh, hang on, I need the code to get into something, or I need to send someone money, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. You know, so much is on that screen, which is great in a way. But I think having specific time away from it and just turning it off, maybe physically turning it off, going to the gym, seeing a friend for a walk, having sections of time where you're away from it every day, that has a direct correlation to better mental health. And there's lots of studies coming out about it as well.
I want to, because usually near the end of the podcast, I ask people about like a book recommendation, a piece of advice, a tool, an action, etc. But I thought we could spend like the last few minutes talking about some coping mechanisms that perhaps have
Mm-hmm.
maybe helped you when you had OCD, but also what you put out there in conversations with clients in your room that say, this is some homework, go away and try this, see how you feel, track how it makes you feel, what's the difference, did you feel worse, do you feel better? I think we speak so much about therapy, medications, ice bath, exercise, healthy diet. We know all those things are really great and they work, but is there anything else that we're missing or anything we should think about?
I think like checking in with what's your story. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself about your life? For
Mm,
example, is it really negative? Or it could just be a bit negative. Is it, I'm not good enough, I always fail at everything? Is that the chatter that's going on in your head? Because regardless of what anyone else says, regardless of the awards you might win or the promotions you might get, if the chatter in your head is negative, that will override all of that stuff, and that will massively dictate your life. Like, your life is really dependent on the thoughts that you have. Now, we
mm,
can't stop thoughts from coming in, but we can choose how we interact with them. And the more you interact with good or at least neutral thoughts, the more of those thoughts you'll get. The more you interact with negativity, the more negativity you'll get, and it will start to run your life. And things you see start to become negative, and you kind of go down that spiral, and it becomes much more difficult to get out of. Like I often say to people, if you can't be positive, at least be neutral. So if you catch yourself in a spiral of negative thoughts, beating yourself up, just be neutral. You don't have to turn them into, I'm amazing, I'm the best, but just be like, okay, do you know what? Today wasn't as good as what I wanted it to be. However, still got a few hours of the day left. What can I do to make it that little bit better? 5% better, 10% better. And I also think come back to like inner work, like the outside environment. Of course, it's important, but it just reflects the inside. That's all it does. So come back to, what is my opinion of me and what can I do to make it better? And if you just start to move away from this person's opinion, that person's opinion, you start to feel like you have more control over your own life. Of course, people's opinions are important. Of course, we're going to look at them, but don't look at them and disregard your own. Your own should always be the most important, because that ultimately is what you have control over. And ultimately, we all want control.
Mm.
So yeah, I would honestly say those two things. Journaling, super helpful as well, because you can look at what's gone well, what's not gone well. And I think being able to go back through your journal and look at past scenarios where you've had difficulties and where you've overcame those difficulties can be really motivating for what you're going through at that moment. And you can start to see, okay, it feels bad right now. However, I had this same feeling 6 months ago. Now it's fine. Now I'm over it. It's all good. Like, the same thing will probably happen again.
Yeah. That inner chatter is one of the hardest things. And I did read a book, and I'm gonna completely forget what it's called. It's untethering or something. I forget the guy. I'll try and add it in the description when I find it. But it's talking about how it's almost like disassociation with those inner thoughts, and it's changing the perspective of how you see it. Because if I'm anxious, I'm an anxious person. If you've got OCD and you're struggling, I have OCD, and it now defines us, who we are. That's our whole personality. That's my being. And actually, to flip it on its head and to change your inner thoughts to seeing it as, no, anxiety is present or OCD is present, it almost disassociates that whole, like, this consumes me, to, no, it's just there and I can push it away if I focus on doing that. Like, it's in my control to say, right, this is something I'm accepting today or not. But it does all come down to that inner monologue, doesn't it? It's like one of the most powerful tools you'll ever have is your mind, but it can work against you so much as well. And I
Yeah.
don't think that happens overnight. I don't think saying to someone, change how you talk to yourself, neutralize the chatter. I think that's one thing I want to make very clear, is that doesn't happen because you listen to this podcast. That takes, like, conscious practice, doesn't it?
It takes conscious and constant practice.
Mm.
It's not enough to do it once. It's
Yeah.
constant. It does get easier because any habit gets easier. But yeah, it's conscious and then constant. That's what I would say.
And that's something that someone taught me as well. That's what's super important, is, like your physical health, you mentioned it earlier, our mental health is something that, a muscle we're going to have to train for the rest of our lives too. Like, it doesn't, I've done it for 30 days now, Anna. Like, can't I just feel better all of the time? Well, no, because it's a muscle that we're constantly working on. There's no end destination of this.
But I think if it becomes a part of you as well, you stop feeling like you're working and you're doing it, just becomes a part of who
more
you
natural.
are. Exactly. There's a really good book. I'm such a fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has some really good books, really, really good books. There's also Becoming Supernatural, and there's also The Placebo Effect. But Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself is probably the most relevant one here.
I've enjoyed every minute of this. We always have a good chat and a catch up. I love it.
Yes.
And I really feel like we explored so many aspects today, from just life in general, your relationships, death, grief, love, loss, mental health. Like, there's so much for people to take away. I appreciate your
Therapy, what
time.
therapy can mean to someone.
Yeah. And hopefully we've softened that conversation a little bit. Like, I know it's not for everyone, but the idea that I can go to you broken, quote unquote, or not, is really nice. I think for me, sometimes I don't just seek therapy for an answer. I just like talking. There's a release.
That's fine. It's, as long as it works for you, it works. That's the thing. No problem is too big. No problem is too small.
Yeah.
If it bothers you, it's important.
I love that. Thanks so much for your time today, lovely.
Oh, good to see you. Thanks for having me.